Hello, welcome to the debate on Sky News. I'm Martin Stanford. Here's our take on developments brought together from America, the UK and around the world. Religious extremism versus global accord. Can we teach the world to sing in perfect harmony? Cybercrime. Who are the villains? And was it Christmas in July as Amazon celebrated 20 years? What makes a perfect world? Christians are told, love thy neighbour as thyself. Islam has, he is not a Muslim who eats his fill while his neighbour is starving. And the Jewish Torah tells us if the animal of a friend requires unloading and an enemy's loading, you should first help your enemy. So then, why are there so many religious wars and conflicts fueled by religion? In a moment, we speak to the US State's Department's Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. That's David Saperstein. But first, let me bring in our usual guests, Democrat commentator Jeffrey Robinson, standing by in New York, and the Conservative commentator Armstrong Williams is in Washington. So much religion, Jeffrey, so little peace in the world. What's gone wrong?
It's very simple. No one's following the religion. It's really that simple. I mean, if you look at the Muslim extremism covering their actions in the name of the Quran, it's a total misreading of the Quran. I mean, it's nothing but that. These people, ISIS, for example, are not religious fanatics. They're simply fanatics disguising their violence in the name of some cause that simply has nothing to do with Islam.
Armstrong, are we being poorly led by world leaders who don't get the role of religion in people's lives?
You know, I think it's so much more significant and profound. This is a centuries-old question that has haunted us since almost the beginning of time. Why did Cain kill Abel? You can ask that question. You know, people actually believe that what they believe is the moral way and will bring about better humanity and bring about a better world. There are some Muslim extremists that believe that the Western world is the detriment of the world. The fact that they embrace same-sex marriages, civil unions, the fact that their women get to do things which in their culture women should not do, which you should hide them and cover them. They have this understanding of what righteousness is. That's why they feel that we're infidels and that we pollute the world. That's why their values are not our values. They think the kind of values that we import around the world is destroying the world. And so they feel that these infidels should be destroyed. They should be scraped from the face of the earth. And they believe this. And it's reinforced in their interpretation of religion. It's just that their view of the world, they feel, is more moral, more better, and will sustain the world more so than ours. And what do? You get rid of that scourge, that leadership, the people that represent the kind of value that defiles the world, not uplifts it. So until we make people understand that all human beings are of value, everyone has a right to their free will, as long as it does not infringe or devastate or corrupt or hurt or harm other people. They don't understand that free will is a choice. If you don't have a free will, you're not really free. And so because people will continue to believe this, it's no different than the Christians early on. And when they were leading sort of like what we're seeing with the Muslim extremists today, it's not going to change. No different than Crusaders. It will continue, and we will continue to have these conversations.
Well, the US State Department's Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom is David Saperstein. He's fresh into the job. David, you've taken on the most almighty job here. What's your number one task, do you think?
Well, it is the key responsibility is to work through our diplomatic corps around the world and our allies around the world to strengthen religious freedom everywhere. Everyone has an internationally guaranteed right to live with religious freedom, to live in accord with their religious conscience, limited only by their imposition of their religion, cannot bar others from exercising the same right, the same as other fundamental rights protected by international law. And we're working with countries to ease those laws practices and regulations that impede religious freedom for groups in their country, and in countries in which usually religious minorities are subject to social hostility from other religious groups or non-religious groups, to encourage the government to help change the climate, broaden religious tolerance and understanding, and protect those minorities who are oppressed.
And does your own faith and your own expertise in your faith help you or hinder you in that quest?
Well, I am part of the Jewish community. We are amongst those segments of humanity who has been most subject to religious intolerance, persecution, often subject to religious violence aimed at us. We know all too well what happens when those people trying to live out their lives with their conscience, in accordance with their conscience, what happens when people of good conscience stand idly by and don't act to protect them. And America lives up to those values shared by so many of our faiths that say we do not stand idly by when we see people being persecuted. I'm very proud of what my country has done and proud to work with a coalition of a score of other countries around the world who have made this a priority concerning their own diplomacy and foreign policy.
It's maybe too simplistic to try and distill all the world's ills into one particular region. But there is, many people would say, a truism which argues if you fix Israel-Palestine, a lot of the other conflicts around the world would go away. Do you agree with that?
Well, in terms of just religious freedom, both Israel and Palestine give a significant amount of religious freedom. Israel is one of the few areas in the region where the Christian community, for example, has grown in numbers rather than shrunk in numbers. I think that the problems of religious freedom go far beyond the Israel-Palestinian conflict. And they cut across the entire global community, and we will best address those when we encourage a community of nations to stand up and to secure for all their citizens that right enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Jeffrey, you see, the problem might be we are encouraging everyone to be free to follow their religion, but only the religion we like.
No, I don't think that's quite it. I mean, if you think back, and Armstrong alluded to the Crusades, it's often said, and I don't know if it's true, but I suppose it is, that more people have been murdered in the name of religion than anything else throughout history. But I just don't know. I mean, I look at this job that David has, and I wish you well, David. I really hope you're successful, but I don't actually know what you're supposed to do. And let me ask you, I have two questions. One, the first is, what's the history of this position? Are you the first one? Are you the first ambassador?
It was created by the International Religious Freedom Act and passed in 1998. I am the fourth person to hold this title and had to have these responsibilities. And we are making a difference in many areas across the globe. Coalitions in areas of the Muslim world, in the Southern Hemisphere, and certainly confronting problems in in Europe and North America. There are many places where we're making progress, but it is a daunting challenge.
Well, I suppose it is. I mean, it's much like waving the flag and motherhood and apple pie and all that. Everybody should be in favor of it. I just don't know what you're going to accomplish, because I think you're preaching to the choir. And I don't say this hostily. I mean, I wish you well, and I hope you change the world. And everybody does sing in harmony like the old Coke commercial used to say. But I just don't get it. I don't know what you're supposed to do or what that post has ever accomplished. Can you tell me one thing, for instance, in Europe or North America that's changed?
Well, we don't deal with the United States, and there aren't that many problems in terms of the Western Hemisphere. In Europe, we obviously have been working closely with the OSCE to help think about the Soviet Jewry movement here, and the ability of the United States, together with like-minded countries, to make a significant difference that led to easing of a number of restrictions in Russia and the release of many people. We get religious prisoners out, prisoners of conscience, across the globe, and we work with countries to change policies. And you can look from Sri Lanka to other countries across the globe, where we're seeing improvements now that are very encouraging.
That's great. Then long may it wave.
Can we balance this discussion?
Absolutely, Armstrong.
Thank you. Look, I think what Dr. Saperstein, what he does is almost invisible, because what he has to do is change hearts and behavior. How do you get people in the world to believe that because you feel your wife is committing adultery or she's looking at a man the wrong way, you have a right to behead her or to stone her? Do we respect that's the way of the Muslim faith? And do we have a right to judge that? No different than people try to judge our prison. The fact that we have people in prison and we have the death penalty in the United States. People see that as a human rights violation, but that is a part of who we are, a part of our value system. When you commit these heinous crimes, you should be put to death. There are all kinds of things in the world. And how, even in, as Mr. Saperstein discussed Israel, how can you begin to talk about the Palestinians in the Middle East where they don't even see Jews as being human? They want to see them disappear in the sea. You hear the Ayatollah Khomeini talking about death to Jews and death to America. How do you get them to value human beings? You may not agree with them, you may not like their positions, but how can you say that humanity is less and devalue it just because you disagree with them vehemently? I think Dr. Saperstein has a tough task, but someone has to do it by changing hearts and really believing that all human beings have value.
So we begin by trying to work with countries across the globe about the curricula of both religious schools and the non-religious schools in those countries to enhance religious tolerance. There are a number of places we're making significant progress. We work with the international community to deal with this on a legal basis, to show, as opposed to blasphemy laws, that there are ways without criminalizing for freedom of expression about religious issues, that people have heartfelt differences. They can address religious tensions and defamation of religion. We help with allies in the Muslim world, including the support of the OIC to pass the Resolution 1618 at the United Nations that makes that a worldwide goal. And we know there are many countries where blasphemy laws still exist and people are brutally punished for their religious expressions. But there are many areas around the world where people really are looking at different approaches and are turning away from the criminal justice system as a way to resolve religious differences and conflicts that may exist.
One of the things I think you face a challenge from, David Saperstein, is perhaps because you are an American, you come from America. Doesn't that bring an awful lot of baggage to your job?
Well, but these human rights are in those international covenants and are norms accepted by the whole world. And of course, on any one of those rights in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there are areas around the world, specific countries in every hemisphere, every continent that does better, and some do much worse. And we are constantly on human rights trying to encourage changes in policies to alleviate oppression of human rights. That's an international challenge, and we're working with countries across the globe, from the Muslim world to countries predominantly Hindu and Buddhist, to try and achieve those goals. So this is not just a Western invention. These are universal norms, and it is a fundamental right of every person, no matter where they live, no matter what their religion, to live their life safely, in accordance with their conscience, both individually and with those who share their faith.
That fundamental right might be agreed by many people, Armstrong, but it's not a reality for many people in many countries. That's the problem, surely.
It will never be a reality, and I think Dr. Saperstein and Jeffrey understands that. But it doesn't preclude you for not pursuing the goal, because if Dr. Saperstein can change one heart, one leader, can you imagine the amount of power that some leaders can have, where hundreds of thousands of people will live versus die, where they're willing to change the rules, where you value life and you come up with another punishment instead of death and the harsh punishments that they have in place. So I think it's like a 1,000-mile journey. Dr. Saperstein is taking baby steps, but this is a baby step arena that he's in, and you have no idea the impact he has until time reveals it. So he must go forward with his mission.
And Jeffrey, do you wish him well in this endeavor, or do you think it's a little bit of waste of government money?
No, I certainly do. And I was gonna mention that Armstrong had taken it too far in suggesting that David could somehow influence the Iranian Ayatollahs. But he's absolutely right. The Long March begins with baby steps. And I had never heard of this office before. David, I wish you all the luck in the world, because what you're doing is absolutely right. And every penny that American taxpayers are spending to get this mission accomplished is money well spent. Godspeed.
And just to throw a little curveball, David Saperstein, at you right at the close of our conversation, the nuclear talks guys have managed to get a new basis with Iran. We discussed that on this program before. Would you try and go there and talk about religious freedoms in Iran too? Would that be one of your destinations?
I'd be talking about religious freedom anywhere that I could. It's a message needed desperately in Iran that we have named as one of that small group of countries of particular concern where there are systemic, egregious, ongoing persecution. So these are daunting challenges, and particularly in countries like Iran that so limit the fundamental right of people to live out their lives in accordance with their religious conscience. The Pew poll says 75% of the world's population lives in countries that have significant restrictions on religious freedom. It may be if they're the majority there, they may not feel it, but others in their country do. And we're working with every country across the globe to try and get them to ease those restrictions, to allow religious freedom to flourish. It makes for a more stable country, a more just country, and a world in which freedom can really flourish.
David Saperstein, we thank you for joining us on the program today. A reminder, you can catch up with Sky News Debate on Apple TV, Roku, on Catch Up, and of course on skynews.com/US. Cyber security needs to up its game. Hillary Clinton has accused China of trying to hack into everything that doesn't move in America. And earlier this month, the New York Stock Exchange and the Wall Street Journal were brought down by computer systems failures. Well, Tim Eades is the chief executive of vArmour, one of the world's leading cyber security companies. And as you can see, he's with us. Tim Eades, what's the biggest challenge facing business today?
It's an amazing time to be in data center security. So the biggest challenge that's going on today is the traditional companies are trying to keep up with the new companies. So the traditional hotel chains are trying to keep up with these new companies like Airbnb. And as they try to transform their data centers to become more digital, you got to become secure as you go agile. So it's a tough time because you can't see the traffic. So the big challenge is you've got to transform your data center to get competitive, but you've got to make it secure at the same time.
Now, we had a story here in the UK, it probably resonated in America as well, about a dating site. This was actually for people who wanted to commit adultery, but all their data may well be released onto the world in the coming days. There must be other stuff going on, though, in the business-to-business space, which you probably know about and we don't. Now, how bad is the problem? How frequent are serious breakdowns of big systems?
Yeah, so that particular breach is just another example of cyber ransom. Right, so cyber ransom, whether it's a movie studio or a government or a social site or a dating site, it's common. It's daily. Some of which you hear about, some of which you don't. And it's really amazing. It's quite frustrating at certain times because people are buying old products. Sometimes 20-year-old products, at least 10-year-old products mostly, to try and protect modern data centers and modern applications. So if you think about it, if you're trying to buy old products to solve new wars, it just doesn't work.
So it's shoot the IT guy. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's love the IT guy. The IT guy needs some help. I mean, this is a time where he should be reaching out and reaching up. He's got more broad access than ever before, probably more access to money than ever before. And the nice thing about it is things used to be appliances and just old pieces of metal. Now you can do things in software. So if you can help him out, he can deploy things relatively quickly and more efficiently. So love the IT guy, but give him the opportunity to be heard.
Let's bring in Jeffrey Robinson in New York and Armstrong Williams in Washington. Armstrong, you've got multi-million-pound businesses around the world. You must be nervous about this kind of cyber attack.
This is truly a fascinating and intriguing discussion because, Tim, here in the United States, as the host just mentioned, presidential candidate Hillary Clinton is speaking out on this issue. But while she speaks out on this issue, Tim, the president is not willing to blame China or include China in the conversation about the hack of the Office of Personnel Management but we call it here in the United States other people's mail. And the reason why the United States doesn't want to do that is because it's quite curious, Tim. They don't want to necessarily bring China into the fold because it would put them in the spotlight of their own cyber activity. And the fact is how they were able to know for certain that China was the one who was responsible for the hacking. And also the United States begrudgingly, think about this, begrudgingly, the people within the investigative units that are responsible for investigating this begrudgingly admire China for what they were able to do, because in the United States, they're trying to do the same.
Yeah, so it's a great point. So it's actually a very interesting point, too. So here's the thing. There's no doubt that the US and the UK and some of the parts of the Western world have incredibly advanced cyber weapons and are deep into infrastructure around the world. But the challenge is, if your main perimeters of your national infrastructure and parts of the national infrastructure and parts of the large kind of core enterprises are fundamentally made of Swiss cheese, i.e. full of holes, how hard do you want to throw a stone? Because the fight back could be worse. When 43 to 49% of all U.S. companies were breached last year, how hard do you want to throw that stone? Yeah, you can have the greatest weapons. Yeah, you don't want them to be revealed. But you have to shore up your own footing first. So one of the things that President Obama is doing is pushing along this federation capability to share information, threats, and stuff. That's a good step. It's a first step. It's nowhere near enough, right? Because if you think about it, the defense used to be land, sea, and air. Now it's land, sea, air, and cyber. So you've got to adequately spend that cyber dollar in two ways: offense and defense. And if your offense is heavily invested in, which is great, you still need a good defense. And right now, clearly, not just the government, but also, the U.S. enterprises are, full of holes.
Jeffrey, you've written about criminality in several tomes. Is it always just criminals who are driving this, or do you think it's international cyber warfare is also an issue too?
The answer to that question is yes. International cyber warfare and playing chess, cyber chess with other countries, is certainly part of it. The idea of corporate spying is huge. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry to find out. The soft drink manufacturer wants to find out the contracts of the competitors' competing soft drink manufacturer. I mean, everybody's trying to get up on everybody else. But there's something that hasn't been raised that I found in covering this both in the City of London and on Wall Street and writing about cyber fraud, is that a number of businesses are simply in denial about this. And 2/3, it's a shocking figure, but 2/3 of all cyber frauds in the city and in Wall Street go unreported to the police. Why? Because the chairman doesn't want the board to know more about it. They don't want the stockholders to know. They don't want the public to know. They don't want a court case that'll blow up and make the customers think that they're vulnerable by keeping their money in the bank. It's a horrible situation. So they just want to make it go away. They will pay whatever they have to pay and then bolster up their fortress to make sure it doesn't happen again. It's really shocking. Now, let me say one other thing.
Well, Jeffrey, if they're not scared enough, can we just ask Tim a question? If they're not scared enough now, because let me see if we can worry them into action, shall we? Because, Tim, one of the points you've been making is that it's not just maybe the lone wolf hacker now. This is very sophisticated, and it sort of links into the world of terror, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
That major institutions are being held to ransom by effectively cyber terrorists.
Absolutely right. But, the gentleman's point is dead on, is that, bad guys are getting into networks and they're moving around. And that one of the reasons why, they are scared to come out and tell people what's going on is because they don't know where they've gone, right? I mean, when you get into a network, most enterprises can't see traffic inside their data center. And if you can't see it, you can't protect it. And there's a very fine line as you start to look, the difference between legitimate network traffic and criminal network traffic, because the criminal tries to blend in. So they're very, very sophisticated. They get in and they spread. And when they're in your network, it's like whack-a-mole. You might get them in one corner, but they pop up into another. So disclosing that they're in is interesting. It's like the OPM breach. The first time the OPM breach came out, it was like 4 million users. But then went to 18. I think it ended up in the 30s, million users, because they don't know where they got in and they don't know how far they got. So, they do get in, they do move around. People can't see the traffic, and it's a major problem. And ransom is just one aspect. I mean, obviously they're after your intellectual property, and you have to change the way that you can see the traffic, and you have to take the protection, which used to be just at the perimeter, and put it next to the assets that you want to protect.
Okay, we better leave it there for today. Tim Eades, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The garage-based online bookstore, which began as Cadabra, has just celebrated its 20th birthday. We know it as Amazon. Well, let's bring in Jeffrey Robinson and Armstrong Williams. I bet you're both users. Armstrong, what's the last thing you got from the Amazon boys?
Oh, it's the last thing that I marketed to the Amazon board. I mean, Amazon is just so many things and everywhere, and it's only going to grow in strength. And I mean, it's just the best example of entrepreneurship the world has known.
Jeffrey Robinson, is there nothing they won't sell you?
Well, there's nothing that you can't sell them as well. I mean, I sell
right.
books on Amazon,
That's
and
right.
and it's created a whole world of ebooks. So Amazon, in that sense, is great, but it's also Godzilla. Remember the old Japanese monster movie? It's Godzilla. It's killed off the bookstores in North America. It is horrible if you are a supplier, because they are known to take your idea and then make it themselves and push you out. They're really nasty to their employees. They're very strict on employees' time and salaries and whatnot. So there's this great side that it's very convenient to buy a book, and now they'll deliver the book in New York the same day. Or anything else that they have. They're opening stores that you can go pick up the stuff, but in the same time, they are also what happens with capitalism run wild.
Yeah, they're going to drone deliveries. Have you done that yet, Armstrong?
You know, I actually have a drone, so I'll let you figure out the rest.
Okay. Thank you guys for being with us once more time
Thank
as well,
you.
Armstrong and Jeffrey. And that's it for this edition of The Debate. You can continue watching Sky News on Apple TV, on Roku, on Catch Up, and of course at skynews.com. Until next time, goodbye.